You're listening to Let's Talk Creation.
Well, welcome to a very special bonus episode of Let's Talk Creation with Paul Garner and Todd Wood. I'm Paul Garner.
And I'm Todd Wood.
And as always, if you're enjoying the podcast, do remember to click the subscribe button, like and share our episodes, tell your friends, leave us a comment or a positive review. All of that is very welcome. Now, this is a special kind of mini episode that we decided we'd sort of squeeze into the schedule because there was a very significant breaking science news story that we wanted to comment on. And it concerns the fossil hominin, Homo naledi, remains of which were discovered in the Rising Star cave system in South Africa's cradle of humankind, and first reported back in 2015, I think.
Yeah.
And viewers and listeners may remember that we've already talked about Homo naledi in an earlier episode 21, so you can check that out if you want to get a bit more of the background. But Todd, before we get to the new discovery that we want to talk about, just remind us what we already know about Homo naledi and the Rising Star Cave.
Yeah, what we know from what has been published about this is that there is, there's this cave called Rising Star, and in these deep, difficult to access recesses of this cave, there are these skeletons, and there's a lot of them. They are mostly of a single species, which has been named Homo naledi. And there are thousands of bones. It's easily, right away, the richest deposit of these sorts of things, these hominins, in all of Africa. So it's a pretty significant discovery. The creatures themselves, they're smaller than we are, so maybe 4 feet tall for the big ones. Their arms are, the anatomy of their shoulders suggests that they would be comfortable lifting their arms up a lot, so perhaps climbers in some sense. The hands look very similar to our hands, but their bones are a bit more curved than ours are, and their feet look very similar to our feet as well. So they're and at 4 feet tall, they have a brain the size of a large orange. So this is sort of they're different from us, right? And they are classified in the same genus Homo that we are. We're Homo sapiens, and they're Homo naledi being named after the Rising Star cave. And the big thing about them that struck everyone as being, controversial, is the hypothesis that was put forward at the very beginning that the bodies have accumulated in this cave because they were intentionally put there. It's really the only... I've given it a lot of thought, and lots of smarter people than I have given it a lot of thought, and it's difficult to come up with an explanation for how these fossils ended up in this cave without employing some sort of artificial, they got dragged down there and left down there. So, and at the time they were announced, this was put forward as being, some people called it burial. The researchers were careful to call it body disposal. They felt like Homo naledi themselves were crawling back into this cave and dropping off the bodies of their deceased tribe members or whatever. Yeah. So, and they were very careful to try not to say too much about the culture of this thing, because we don't know the culture of this thing. We don't know if it had a culture. But I haven't really been able to come up with any, I haven't come up with any other really good explanation for how they got down there. I haven't heard anybody else come up with good explanations other than, they might have gotten lost, or they might have, washed in there. Those really don't satisfy the sorts of features that we see in the cave. But anyway, so that's your basic introduction.
Yeah, so we've got this new hominin species. It's got this strange sort of mosaic of advanced and primitive like features, if you want to use that kind of evolutionary terminology. It's relatively young, geologically speaking, from from conventional dating perspective. And you've got effectively all this treasure trove of bones, but without very much else in the cave. It looks like deliberate disposal of bodies.
Right.
And one of the curious things about this cave is that it's a long way down into the cave, and it's through some very narrow, winding passageways that you would have to negotiate in the dark to get to the places where the bones have been deposited. So, so that's kind of the discovery as we knew about it.
Yeah.
So, Todd, do you think that Homo naledi is human, or was it just some kind of ape?
Well, it's a good question. I think it's human. I don't think the skeletal evidence is really that different from Homo sapiens and from other, Neanderthals and Erectus and things that creationists generally think are human. And my own sort of scientific statistical analysis of these things has shown that they cluster together with other human beings. So that was my conclusion. And I was really hopeful, let's call it that, that would happen. Because the burial evidence struck me as being so important. The only other really credible explanation I could come up with for these things is that somebody else was dragging their bodies down into the depths of this cave and dropping them off. And even though I find, the idea that someone would drag grandma and grandpa down there hours in the darkness and the cold and drop off their bodies, I think dragging Fido and Spot down there is even less likely. That just strikes me as really weird. You can just bury them on the surface if you're more sort of a Homo sapiens. We know how to bury things. So yeah. My suspicion was,
and we don't have any evidence of Homo sapiens in association with this cave, do we?
We have not.
Right?
We have not been told of any evidence of Homo sapiens. We know the cave was mapped by people before the fossils were really uncovered. So we know there have been people in there, modern period. Mm-hmm. But there's been nothing reported in terms of the sorts of maybe stone tools that you would associate with early human beings, or other sort of, physical remains of Homo sapiens. That's not been reported. So my understanding of things right now is that there's nothing in there other than Homo naledi and some random animal bones.
Yeah. But your conclusion that Homo naledi is part of the human created group, part of the human Baramin, proved quite controversial among other creationists, and they had some different perspectives.
And it's been really fascinating because of all the sort of taxa that we've come up with, that paleontologists have come up with and discovered. This is the one where I think creationists disagree perhaps the most significantly. So you've got some folks who argue that Homo naledi is a mix of two different things, maybe an ape and a human. There's really not any skeletal evidence to support that. There's multiple copies of pretty much every bone in the body, and they're all pretty similar. So it would seem like it's all one thing. So the whole mixed up human and non-human stuff, I don't think that really flies. But there have been others who've just said, this is too weird. It can't be human. It's too weird. Which, at least I can understand that. It is, because it is weird. It is a weird looking.
Yeah.
It's a weird looking thing. And then you have some who have said that it's maybe some sort of pathology, some sort of pathological growth. Usually when you see that sort of pathology, you would expect to see a lot of variability in your sample, and you don't see that in Homo naledi. They're all very uniform in their form. So that I'm not sure I buy that. And then you have some who agree with me and say, yeah, it is human. It is human. And yeah, they went down in that cave to drop off their dead relatives, and that's what it was all about. And yeah, so the jury is kind of still out. There's not a lot of agreement among a lot of creationists about what this actually is.
And that kind of brings us then to this new announcement that's just been made. So 1st of December, Lee Berger, who is the paleoanthropologist who sort of discovered and described Homo naledi, he held a press conference at which he announced some major new discoveries from the Rising Star Cave. And you tuned in, I think, to that press conference, which was streamed online.
I did.
So could you just tell us about what these new discoveries are?
Well, first let me say, it's a pretty obvious thing that if you are going to go hours into a cave where there is absolutely no light, it's totally dark, you're going to need a light to see, right? It's just common sense.
Right.
I've been in caves, commercial caves where they shut the lights off so you can see how dark it is. And it is scary dark. I mean, it is total blackness. So if these guys were going down there into this pit, they would have to have some kind of light. But, how do you find evidence of light in the form of fire? You might expect maybe you'd find a burned bit of something or other, but mostly what you're burning is wood, right? So that's going to rot away really easily. So I wasn't sure that we would be able to find evidence of fire use. I figured it would be something that we would just have to infer from the fact that they're down there in this deep, dark recesses of this cave. And so, that's as good as we were going to get. But so Berger gets out and he starts to talk about his own expedition. So this opening to get into this chamber where all these bones are is extremely small. Apparently he went on a diet, lost 55 pounds so that he personally himself could get squeezed down into this cave. And I got to tell you, I've seen him speak a couple of times and he did look pretty thin this time.
That's commitment.
Yeah, that's crazy. So he's down in this cave and he's looking up at the ceiling, right? So there's this one chamber where there's thousands of bones, almost all Homo naledi. There's a little bit of baboon. There's a couple of owl bones and some rodent teeth, but that's it. Thousands of bones of Homo naledi. And he's looking up at the ceiling of the chamber and he says, I began to realize that the black markings on the ceiling were probably soot. Okay, I thought, that's interesting. Yeah. And then he starts to talk about the other excavations going on in the cave where they have uncovered evidences of burned hearths, right? So where you'd make a campfire, be all that ash left behind, that's a hearth, and those are detectable in the fossil record. We know there are Neanderthal hearths that are pretty well characterized. There are other hearths that we don't know who made them. So he talks about this hearth. There's a hearth apparently when you get into this chamber, you've got to go up and over this massive rock, right? So that the opening to the chamber where the bones are is way up high. So you have to climb up and then climb back down again. And it turns out just outside of the bone chamber at the base of this rock, there's a hearth. And in the hearth, there are burned antelope bones. So that's pretty crazy. Then he starts talking about other chambers in the Rising Star system where there are other evidences of fire. He's showing pictures of all this. He's showing places where there were pretty clear, I mean, I don't know what else it would be, burn marks on the wall. He was showing places where there were rocks set up to make sort of a flat surface, and then there was ash around it. And that's very interesting. And he mentioned there are other places where there's just a lot of ash and burned animal bones. And at least one bit of charcoal that he showed, a piece of burned wood that was, some kind of charcoal, presumably. So I was rather excited by these announcements. I was actually, my wife was working on her schoolwork downstairs in our house, and I was upstairs in the bedroom watching on my, I guess it was my laptop, and I go running down the stairs and start pointing at the thing, and we're listening to it together, and I'm very excited. And yeah, I mean, it's more than I expected, right? I expected maybe we would find some scorch marks on the wall, maybe we would find some simple stuff, but apparently this cave is just full of burned evidence, charcoal and hearths and places where rocks have been arranged to make fire, places where they burned animal bone, and so forth. So pretty big deal.
Yeah. Now, there is a caveat to all of this, which is that these new discoveries have not yet been published.
Yes.
And we're when we record this, we're a couple of weeks on, I guess, from when this was announced. So so we're still kind of awaiting for the publication to come along. Yes,
and yeah, I'm getting kind of annoyed. A lot of people, I think, are getting kind of annoyed. Every discovery he's announced prior to this has been accompanied by the scientific research report that tells you, where he found things, how much he found, what they look like, shows a bunch of data. It basically is sort of the communication of one scientist to all the other scientists that says this is what you want to know about this sort of thing. Now, for this discovery, I have a million questions, and I don't know how to answer them because he hasn't released any paper. He hasn't even released a preprint. A preprint in science is a relatively new thing. The last 20 years, scientists have taken to posting manuscripts, unpublished manuscripts, right on the internet, so you can read the manuscript ahead of time before it gets published. He hasn't even done that. So I don't know, for example, what evidence there is that these black marks are actually burn evidences, right? There are chemical reactions that can make things turn black. So what I would need is, I don't know, some kind of chemical analysis that would show, this black stuff is actually burn remnants. So that's problem number one. I don't know that this is really evidence of burning. Problem number two, he says there are burned antelope bones, but I don't know what kind of antelope that is, right? Antelope is a massive category, even in the modern world. There's dozens of species of antelope. And in the fossil record, there'd be dozens more. And so which antelope is burned here? Is this plausibly something Homo naledi would have encountered, perhaps at the same time that he lived? Is this plausibly something he could have hunted or scavenged or something like that? I don't know. We don't know. And the big question for me is, how do you know Homo naledi made these fires?
Right.
How do you know that this wasn't somebody else coming in later and making a bunch of fires as they explored the cave prior to the rediscovery of the bones in modern historical times? The charcoal is especially weird because caves are wet environments, usually, and you would expect wood to rot really quick. So the idea that he's showing this charcoal makes me think it's young, it's recent. And then, then that brings up, what is likely going to be the response from people who think Homo naledi cannot be human. And they will be saying they didn't make these fires. And I can't answer that. I don't know how to answer that because there's no paper yet. He's made, oh my goodness, 3 or 4 more announcements about Homo naledi in the past, and they've always been accompanied by publications. But this one seems to be delayed for whatever reason, and he's not telling us. He's, in fact, people asking him for the data, and he's saying, this is a tweet that he posted. Our field is strange, he says. Why is sharing images and location of charcoal, burnt bone, ash, hearth structures, and probable soot any different from a preprint? A preprint is designed to get feedback. This is to anyone think that's not charcoal. Pictures are not, a preprint is something I could go and take to a journal and say, here, I'm submitting this for publication. You can't do that with just random photos and a YouTube video. That's that's not going to work.
There's not enough there's not enough information to be sure about any of this. So but it's intriguing, and we know that if these bones are being deliberately deposited there, somebody had to be presumably using artificial light to find their way. So it's really intriguing.
Yeah, it is intriguing. And if they are human, then I have no problem thinking that they made fire and that this is their fire. And I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't think Lee Berger is prone to exaggerate and spin things to make it sound very dramatic for his audience. But he's not an outright liar. He's not making stuff up here. So I don't think he's telling us tales about the fire evidence from Dinaledi. And he's got a massive team of fellow researchers. Surely one of them would come forward and say, well, he's not being fully forthright or whatever. But nobody's done that. So, the only other explanation, I would see is some vast conspiracy. And that's crazy. So, I don't know enough about the results to be able to explain why they're significant and why they really support the humanity of naledi. And maybe before the end of the year, we'll see something. It's been 2 weeks now and nothing. And so I don't know.
And it's going to be interesting, I think, to see how other creationists, perhaps those who reject the humanity of Homo naledi, respond to it. If these discoveries stand up to scrutiny. And I guess, some may change their minds. That's a possibility. That some may think, well, this does support the humanity of naledi. Others, I guess, might attribute the fires to Homo sapiens and say, well, it was Homo sapiens that kind of dragged these naledi in for some purpose we don't really understand. That's one possible response, I guess. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
We're going to have to wait and see. I mean, I felt like we should do a special little mini episode here, but at the same time, I kind of wanted to wait until I had the data in hand so that I could say, this is how we know these things.
Yeah.
But I don't know. And so maybe we'll revisit this later when we have a better handle on what the evidence, the papers are and what the evidence actually is.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think we'll kind of leave it there because I think we've covered most things that we just wanted to say. But we thought it was a significant enough announcement that we wanted to talk about it in this special bonus episode. Remember that all of our streaming platforms, all of our show notes, you can find those on our website at coursesci.org/podcast. We love to get your questions and comments, and you can email those to us at podcast@coursesci.org, or you can leave comments and questions, of course, on our YouTube channel. Don't forget, as we said at the outset, to subscribe, like and share our episodes, hit the notification bell so that you hear about future content, leave us a positive review if you're listening to us on a podcast streaming platform. And as always, as we end these episodes, we do appreciate your support, your donations to support the work that we do and in bringing this content to you. If you would like to give a donation to Biblical Creation Trust, who is one of the organizations that sponsors the podcast, you can visit our website at biblicalcreationtrust.org, and there's a donation button on the homepage, and if you click on that, it will take you to all of the various ways that you can give to support the work that we do. The other sponsor of the podcast is Core Academy of Science. And Todd, how would people give to Core Academy?
You can check out Core Academy at coresci.org/connect. There you'll find links to a lot of the content that we really would like you to check out and learn about our ministry. And you can also visit coresci.org/donate to find ways that you can contribute. Remember, each episode is about $600. So if you're interested in maybe sponsoring an episode or maybe even, making some suggestions about something you'd like to hear and seeing if we'll take it seriously, let us know and make that contribution, and we would be very grateful and appreciative.
That's great. Well, that's it for this mini episode, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Bye for now.
See you later.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Let's Talk Creation. If you have questions, send them to podcast@coresci.org. That's podcast@coresci.org. And be sure to let your friends know about Let's Talk Creation. And check us out on social media. Thank you.